So please welcome bold and dynamic Toastmaster Rajak Aslam to give his evaluation on speech of 4 speakers.
Toastmaster of the day, fellow Toastmasters, guests, good evening.
Good evening.
Oil. Is it a familiar term? Is it a familiar term?
Yes.
Can't be more familiar, you're in the region. So, let's look at the objectives of the speech by our target speaker, Dilip Jain, and then look at what are the things I liked, what things can be improved, what were the subjects he presented, and how was it done. The speech it was a technical speech, so by very nature it had to have a lot of graphs and details. So it had 2 key objectives. Objective number 1, it had to be systematic and concise. Objective number 2 was that it needed to relate to the audience, the knowledge levels, and therefore on both these aspects, the speech was spot on, I thought. The speech itself was very complex, so if you try to follow that speech and if I ask you what he really said, it might be quite a stretch, but since I was the evaluator, I had to listen to every word he had to say. Now, he broadly, his speech had 6 themes to it, and I'll read out what those 6 themes were. Speech, the number 1, he talked about some basics. He talked about what a barrel of oil was. How many liters is it?
159.
159. There is numbers here. I thought 159 is what
Yes,
he
yes,
thought.
yes.
I'll write that. Then he talked about what are the conventional energy source. Then he talked what was shale gas. So he tried to make a distinction and tell us. So that was about the basics. The next one was he talked about the market, the customer itself. He talked about cartel. He talked about OPEC. He talked about non-OPEC. He talked who was a member and what Iran was out of it and all of that. Then he talked about pricing. He talked about the demand versus supply story and how demand and supply really determines the price. He talked about the trends, then he talked about why shale gas was more expensive, and he showed us the detailed exercise about how the shale gas you have to go deeper than conventional energy. He also talked about consumption, and he talked about oil, coal, and others. Then he talked about the use, and finally he gave a personal opinion. That's how the 6 themes played out. Now, what did I like about it? I certainly, the choice of topic was absolutely spot on, as I said, and therefore I was able to relate to it just as everybody else. I like the great deal of depth he went into in terms of putting the trends and the prices and educating us in part of it. What would I have done different? Well, I thought it was a very technical session, and therefore I needed some kind of a takeaway for it. For example, I would have said, what oil price really means that today I don't pay taxes, tomorrow I pay taxes. Yes, very well done, but somehow connect that to everyday living. I would perhaps try to bring some kind of a humor. It's difficult, but then you have to try and engage the audience so that when they walk away from this room, that they carry a message with us, not just the technical specs of it. That's what I would have done. But nevertheless, it was a very good, very detailed rehearse, as only Dilip Jain can do. And finally, his closing, I like particularly well, when he said, closing, when he said, oil will show its colors. And I'm waiting to see that.